Hey, welcome everybody. Dr. Nathan Thompson here, author of Transformation 28, creator of the T28 Challenge, clinic director of Exemplify Health Center, and let's talk about stress. So in this talk, I'm going to go over with you the natural solutions to help you improve your sleep, improve your energy, and improve your mood. So let's go ahead and get right into it. I want to go over with you as we get into it, the whole stress response. So think of this. If we put you in a room and we lock the doors, we lock the windows, we close the drapes, and made the room completely dark and lit the room on fire, what do you think would happen to you? You would see your heart rate go up. You would see your blood pressure skyrocket. You would see that your breathing would increase. You would see that your body would start to mobilize sugar to use for energy so that you could escape. You would see that your adrenaline would surge. You would see that your digestive system would completely stop. You would see that your body would start to use all of its resources to help you fight or flee. Because right then and there, your body is designed to survive first and thrive second. So let's say after 10 minutes, we take you out of the room and we have your primary care physician that's sitting right there. He's ready to take your blood. He's ready to measure your blood pressure. He's ready to measure all of your hormones. And you think about it, right then and there, what do you think we're going to see? Are we going to see high blood pressure? Are we going to see cholesterol imbalances? Are we going to see a high amount of stress hormones? Are we going to see low growth and repair hormones, things like estrogen, testosterone, human growth hormone, or thyroid hormone? Yes. Now, what if we decided then to do this to you 5 or 6 times a day for the next year? And if you think about it, do you think that would start to interfere with your hormone system, with your sleep, with your mood, with your energy, with your digestion? And what if we did that every single day and your doctor then decided then to put you on sleep medications, reflux medication, Synthroid, testosterone, high blood pressure medication, cholesterol medication? So what do you think the solution instead would be? Instead, you would tell your doctor, hey, you got to stop putting me in this room 5 times a day. If you can take me out of that room 5 times a day, then I'm not going to be so stressed and I'm not going to have a need for that medication. Now, here's what I believe. I believe this, that the body was created to be healthy and well. It is not programmed to be sick. And when we are sick, you first have to look at where you're interfering, find the cause of what's interfering with it, and start to fix it. Now, this can be great news, and this can also be bad news for some people. The great news is this. It's great news because it means you have a say in your health. You have the ability to get well. But it also can be bad news for some people because it really means you're the only person that's ultimately in charge of your health. It also means that you are the one that's going to have to act. And the purpose of today's talk is actually to show you it's to be the lighthouse. Listen, a lighthouse provides direction. It shows the boat where the harbor is. It guides the boat to safety. Unfortunately, though, the lighthouse does not uproot itself and rescue the boat. And this is what today is all about, to give you the direction on where you need to steer your boat, to get you back to the place where you want to be at when it comes to your health. But listen, it's going to take some work. Now, think of this. If you found yourself in the middle of a lake and you were in a boat and you discovered that your boat was quickly filling up with water, the first thing that you would want to do is try to figure out where the leak is coming from. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to just sit there for the next 4 hours just trying to furiously bail out the boat. Fix the leak, then bail out the boat. And this is true when it comes to your health. You know, what happens is I see a lot of people, they start seeing the effects of stress start to take hold on their health. They start to experience things like poor sleep, anxiety, depression, low energy, weight gain, digestive issues, immune system problems. And what we do is we immediately just decide to hush these warning signs with medication. Or some people, they'll look for the latest supplement or maybe the latest fad diet. But what they don't do is they first don't identify the source of the stress. So first what you have to do is you have to look at where the stress is actually coming from, fix where that stress is coming from, and then you can start to bail out the boat. You got to work on fixing the behavior that got you there in the first place. And once you fix that behavior, now you don't have to actually keep bailing the boat out all the time. You plug the holes, then you can start bailing out the boat to get yourself back to a place of health. So before we go into the stress response and how people start to get sick with stress, let's first go over some really key hormones that I'm going to go over so you can understand what we're talking about on stress affecting hormones and causing disease inside of the body. So here's the hormones of stress and their purpose. Number one is cortisol. The purpose of cortisol is as a stress hormone that's produced at the adrenal glands. This is designed to help mobilize sugar and help to increase your energy when you're under acute stress. The second hormone is known as adrenaline, otherwise known as epinephrine and norepinephrine. This causes your heart rate to increase, your blood pressure to increase, and causes your breathing to increase to help you prepare to fight or to flee. The third hormone is actually known as DHEA. Now, DHEA is produced in the adrenal glands, and it's a precursor to testosterone. It's a precursor to estrogen, precursor to progesterone, also known as the sex hormones. Another stress hormone is thyroid, and this isn't directly a stress hormone, but thyroid is actually influenced by high levels or low levels of stress. And thyroid is responsible for setting your metabolic rate as well as other functions. You also have another sex hormone, in women especially, estrogen and progesterone. So estrogen is what gives women its female characteristics. It also helps to regulate the menstrual cycle and regulate the reproductive system. Now, progesterone is needed by women to help maintain a healthy pregnancy, and is for implantation of a fertilized egg. And then the last one is actually testosterone. This is needed in men and women, but men specifically is what drives libido. It's to help increase bone mass. It's to help decrease fat and increase muscle mass and strength. And it's also needed for the production of red blood cells and the production of sperm and in reproduction. What's interesting is if you look at men over the last 40 years, you've seen that the average men's testosterone has decreased significantly. These are the hormones of stress. So now that we know what the hormones of stress is, let's go over what happens when there's a stress response. So the first thing that happens is this, is that there's going to be some form of stress. And the three forms of stress is not just mental stress, but also chemical stress and also physical stress. So chemical stress can be a lot of different things. It can be medications that you're taking. It can be the standard American diet. It could be having food intolerances. It could be leaky gut syndrome. It can also be over-caffeinating, having too much caffeine through the day. The mental can actually be things like lack of sleep, having job stress, having the illness of chronic busyness, or having different relationship stresses. And the physical can also be from having spinal and neurological issues, or maybe even from over-exercising. So what happens is that you have a stress. The first place that this is actually processed in is that it's processed in what's known as the limbic system. This is what we know as the gut feeling. The thing with your gut is this, and a lot of people say, well, I have a gut feeling about this. Your gut feeling is that sometimes your gut feeling is right, and sometimes your gut feeling is actually wrong, and the limbic system of whether it gives you this feeling of this gut feeling or this feeling of fear is based actually on past experiences. And what that means is sometimes if you've had a negative past experience that actually didn't warrant a stress response, is that a lot of times you can start having these gut feelings over things that aren't necessarily should be a stress. So the limbic system communicates directly to the sympathetic nerve system, okay? So the limbic system communicates to the sympathetic nerve system. And then this communicates around the spine and it goes to the adrenal glands. And this is going to release adrenaline. Now, adrenaline is what gives you the increase in heart rate, is what gives you the increase in blood pressure, it gives you the increased breathing. And you'll notice that this happens really quickly. So even before you've even identified that something is a stressor or that something might be life-threatening, you'll actually notice that the body will release adrenaline even before that. So this happens really quickly. Now, secondarily, it happens neurologically, but then it also happens hormonally. Remember that the body communicates through two pathways. It communicates neurologically and then through the hormone system. Now, neurologically, this happens quickly. Hormonally, it takes a little bit more time. So through the hormonal system, the limbic system communicates with what's known as the hypothalamus. And then the hypothalamus communicates with the pituitary gland. It's a little gland that sits right behind the eyes in the brain, and this produces what's known as adrenocorticotropic hormone. Now, this hormone gets released by the pituitary into the blood, then it travels to the adrenal glands, and it signals the adrenal glands to release this hormone that's known as cortisol. So it's working through these two different hormones. So as a result, when you're under this acute stress, you have an increase in your blood pressure. Now, this increase in blood pressure, this increase in blood sugar, this increase in the constriction of blood vessels start to shunt the blood away from the organs into the extremities, slowing the digestion, tightening up your muscles, particularly around the spine, and increasing this inflammatory response. All of these are good things in an acute crisis. However, if the acute crisis is happening all the time and the body never gets a chance to recover from it, I want you to think of this. If you're constantly increasing your blood sugar, this can cause things like diabetes. If you're constantly constricting your blood vessels, this is great for energy to your limbs, but it's not good for your organs and heart. Increasing blood pressure is good. It increases the oxygenation to the limbs, not good long-term for the heart. Slowing your digestion for the long term is going to cause gastrointestinal issues. Tightening the muscles, particularly the postural muscles around the spine, is going to cause damage to the spine and neurological system. And having an increased inflammatory response, well, it's good because the body is getting ready to heal in case you're injured. But if chronic inflammation can actually lead to a lowered immune response that can actually lead to things like heart disease or cancer or an increase in chronic pain. So this response is the body doing the right thing. And it's a great response when the bear is chasing you. But the question is what happens if the bear never stops chasing you? And the thing is, here's what your brain doesn't differentiate between real stress and perceived stress. Real stress is the bear chasing you, but perceived stress would be things like stressing about money, stressing about your job, or stressing about your marriage, stressing about your kids, stressing about what other people think of you, or maybe even stressing about your friend Mary, who has a perfect life on Instagram and absolutely looks flawless because she knows how to use the latest filter. If you don't know what I'm talking about, then you don't have to worry, obviously, about this one. So that's just mental stress. And what about the chemical, the physical stress that we undergo every single day? Toxicity, food intolerances, damage to our spinal and neurological systems. Listen, our bodies weren't meant to handle this stress day in and day out. Now remember, we talked about cortisol and this other hormone known as DHEA. These two hormones have to be kept in balance. So if you have a high amount of cortisol, you're automatically going to have low DHA. Remember, the function of the DHA is as a precursor to a lot of your hormones. So a high amount of cortisol and a high amount of adrenaline will actually cause a decrease in the release production of DHEA. And if you have a decrease in this DHEA, you're going to have a lowered thyroid output. You're going to have a decrease in estrogen and progesterone. You're going to have a decrease in testosterone. The reason why is if you are over here, you are constantly under acute stress, your body doesn't care about growth, repair, or about reproduction, or your metabolism, which is going to be all of these hormones actually here. So the body will always be in this fight or flight, and it's designed to get you out of a crisis or emergency. Good and acutely, but really bad when it never ever ends. So here's what happens if you have chronic stress. So there's so many things. In fact, the FDA actually has, the CDC, I should say, actually released a study, and they said and estimated that up to 90% of doctor's visits are due to the effects of chronic stress. So here's what happens when you're under chronic stress for long periods of time. Number one, it affects your brain. It will start to impair your memory. Number two, it starts to break down tissue because you're not growing and you're not repairing, which means that it then starts breaking down your muscle, your connective tissue. It starts taking energy away from the bones, which causes a decrease in bone mass. So if you think about it, the body wants to do everything it can to try to get energy from anywhere with the preservation of fat. And if you think about it, that preservation of fat is actually there to help you over the long term to keep energy in reserves with the expense of breaking down other things like muscle, connective tissue, and bones. This is really important, especially with people who overexercise, because if they find themselves, their muscles, they're decreasing in their strength, they're getting injured all the time, you have to look at their body as being under chronic stress. Now, energy control. So if you have more glucose because of cortisol, you're going to have less glucose sensitivity. And I talk about glucose sensitivity in my book, Transformation 28. But if you're constantly bombarding the cells with glucose, this can lead to type 2 diabetes. This also can lead to long-term suppression of the immune system. So it's going to decrease what's known as natural killer cells. It's going to decrease what's known as interleukin 2. And these things are actually needed to help fight infections. So long-term suppression of the immune system can lead to things like cancer, and lead to things like fungal infections, chronic yeast infections. It takes longer for you to overcome any kind of bacterial or viral infection. In fact, they did a study with rats that was absolutely fascinating. They took one group of rats and they wounded them and put them in a stressful environment. They took another group of rats and they actually wounded them and then they put them in a non-stress healing environment. And they actually found that it took 40% longer for those rats that were wounded in a stressed environment for them to be able to heal. And they also found that there actually was more bacteria in that infection versus the one that was wounded in a non-stress environment. And even if you think about it, bacteria, they're not there to destroy you. They're only opportunistic. They're only there and appear when you allow your immune system to go down. Now, this also interferes at the liver, interferes with impaired detoxification. So detox doesn't take place, which actually makes you more susceptible to the effects of toxicity. Things like toxic food, your personal care products, even ingredients in vaccines are toxic. It also slows down your metabolism. So the body's metabolism starts to slow down. It starts to want to hang on to energy. Because if in this fight or flight response, it says, we don't know when you're going to get your next meal. So the metabolism starts to slow down, and body tends to preserve and store fat rather than burn fat. And this can lead to excess fat around the hips, the thighs, and the waist. And we know that high cortisol actually leads to the deposition of cellulite, specifically in ladies, around the butt and around the thighs. Now, it can also impair your recovery. If you have high cortisol at night, it's going to impair the release of human growth hormone. And this hormone is absolutely needed to actually help the body grow and repair, to actually increase muscle mass, to repair tendons and ligaments. And if you have too much cortisol, you're not going to be healing and repairing at night. There's why some people who might actually over-exercise, why they actually predisposes them to get injured or have chronic type injuries. This also interferes with your sex hormones. So this will cause an imbalance in estrogen, an imbalance in progesterone, and it'll also cause an imbalance in testosterone. So, and the reason why is because DHEA is inhibited when you have high amounts of cortisol. Now, it also will decrease your thyroid output. So, cortisol will decrease what's known as thyroid stimulating hormone, and this will and it also inhibits the conversion of T4, which is actually circulating thyroid hormone, which doctors usually measure on blood tests, and it also inhibits the conversion of T4 to T3. T3 is what's actually converted at the liver, and doctors rarely measure this. Now, this can also cause massive GI dysfunction. So remember, the GI system is actually chronically inhibited. So when it's chronically inhibited, you're not getting a blood supply to it and digestion is shut off, it can start to damage the wall of the gastrointestinal system, and it can damage the gut's healthy microbiome. Now this can lead to further stress perceived by the body and can stress out the adrenal glands even more. It's like a double whammy. And this is going to lead to more chronic inflammation, even autoimmunity, and it can lead to colon disease. So let's go over really what you can do in the different phases that people are in when it comes to chronic stress. Now, this is actually a really simple saliva test that anyone can do that measures what's known as your cortisol levels throughout the day. When you look at your cortisol levels, remember, cortisol is not entirely bad. It's just that you have to have them in balance. So if you look at a normal cortisol test, and you actually measure this through your saliva 4 times throughout the day. So you should actually see that initially your cortisol levels should actually be high when you wake up in the morning, and then you should see them gradually taper off throughout the day. So when your cortisol is actually here, you don't need the caffeine IV to get through your day. And at night, when this cortisol level starts to go down, you really have no issues actually falling asleep and staying asleep. Now, the first stage when you start to undergo chronic stress is, we call this tired and wired. So this is your cortisol with acute stages of stress. And this can actually be here for years. So your cortisol, when you're under stress, starts kicking out high levels of cortisol throughout the day. So you can see that cortisol is high. Cortisol should start to dip throughout the night, but it actually stays very high. Now, what happens when you get into this, what's known as tired and wired, is that you're going to crave a lot of sugar. You're going to have problems falling asleep and maybe even staying asleep. And a lot of times people in this stage start to experience a lot of what's known as anxiety. So in this stage, the adrenal glands are pumping out a lot of cortisol. Now, the next phase we call is actually chronic fatigue. So in this chronic fatigue, this is where you start to see cortisol really elevated in the morning, but it takes a really sharp drop midday, and you start to experience midday, you notice that your energy really drops, it gets really low. You start to experience drowsiness after 12 o'clock. This is also where you start to see that you're not recovering well from exercise. So you're going to notice that your levels of energy are going to be okay in the morning, but you see it really drop off really quickly, and through the rest of your day, you can see that your energy starts to give way. And then finally, the last stage of where you're at in the spectrum would be known as burnout. Another name for this would be like adrenal exhaustion. So what happens is that you have this chronic stress, the adrenals have been kicking out cortisol for years, and you also, your adrenal glands just can't keep up anymore. So they actually just burned out because they just don't have the energy, the resources, the cells just cannot produce cortisol anymore. This is actually where you see that the adrenal glands are not able to be able to kick out any cortisol hardly at all. And this is where people start to wake up tired. So they have all-day fatigue. They have irritability. They have problems getting going in the morning. This is also where they start to experience very low motivation. So listen, the adrenals are exhausted. They have a hard time producing even normal cortisol levels. Now, there's another organ that this happens to as well, and it's actually called type 2 diabetes. So with the standard American diet, most people are actually causing insulin to get pumped out so much throughout the day with the amount of sugars and grains and things like that that they're consuming, that finally it gets to the point over a period of years, maybe even decades, where the pancreas cannot produce any more insulin because you have just actually wore it out. So this would be cortisol burnout. All right, so now that we know the stress response and the hormones that are involved with stress, I want to go over with you how you can start to overcome stress, fatigue, and burnout. Now, anytime that you're looking at health, you have to address the 3 legs of the stool. So you have the physical stressors, you have the chemical stressors, and you have the mental stressors. Now, health is a product of being healthy mentally, not having chemical stressors, and being well physically. And you can't actually sit on a 1-legged stool or even a 2-legged stool. You have to sit on a 3-legged stool. And this is why it's so important that you're addressing all 3 of these stools in order to experience health. Let's talk about mental stress for a little bit. It's the bottom of the 9th inning. You're down by 3 runs. The bases are loaded. The count is 3-2. The pitcher winds up, and you're at bat, and you decide not to swing. The catcher catches the ball, the whole game hangs in the balance. And all eyes are on the umpire, who gets up from his crouch and he pauses. Fans start yelling, "Hey, well, what is it? Is it a ball or is it a strike?" And the umpire responds, "It ain't nothing till I call it." And here's the thing when it comes to mental stress. I can't tell you where your mental stress is happening because different events cause people to be stressed out differently. And this is the same with mental stress. Stress really isn't anything until you call it stress. I want you to think of this, that everything that happens is just an event. And just like an umpire, you have the choice on what you actually want to call it. So let's talk about some things that you can do in order to help you with mental stress especially. So the first thing is number one, be an anchor, not a flag. Listen, you drop an anchor and you stay put. But a flag blows in whatever direction the wind is blowing. And this comes down to identifying what your core values are. What are your core values? I want you to write these down. What are your core values? If you don't know what your core values are, then you become a flag. You go in whatever direction your emotions take you. Now listen, I'll tell you what my core values are. My core values are my health. I realize if I'm not healthy, I'm no good for God or others. My core values are my faith. I'm committed to growing my faith and becoming more Christ-like daily. I'm committed to my family. I'm committed to growing deep and meaningful personal relationships with my spouse and my kids, not just showing up and putting food on the table. And I'm also committed to my mission. I'm committed to teaching others the principles of health and healing and empowering others to live their best health right now so they can fulfill their own dreams. See, what happens is if you don't know what your core values are, you become the flag, meaning you have to rely on emotions and your time is spent on whichever way the next emergency actually takes you. So this is a great exercise that I want you to do. And all you have to do is you text War Plan to the number 44222. And when you do this, I'll actually email you a weekly war plan. And this is actually an exercise that I want you to do. I want you to print off 2 copies of your war plan. I want you, number one, for the first copy, write down exactly what your whole week looked like from rising out of bed to going to bed at night. And then I want you to add up and see how much time you spent in all of these different areas. What you're going to notice is a huge wake-up call because the greatest commodity is not money, it's time. And I actually found that where you spend your time determines truly what you value most. There's so many people who say what they believe, but really they spend time on what they value. And I want you to think about it. If your time that's spent is out of alignment with your values, that right there is a source of stress. So if you don't tend to your core values, your core values begin to fall apart. For example, if you said my health is a core value, but you eat fast food, you drink every night, you didn't exercise, you're out of alignment with those core values. And on the second sheet of paper, I want you to actually identify what your core values are and then schedule time throughout the week and put in where you're going to tend to those core values. It's kind of like putting in the large rocks first and filling everything else with sand. If you do that, everything fits. But if you put the little things of sand in first and put the rocks in last, you'll see that it doesn't fit. So you have to identify what your values is and then schedule this in and tend to it every single week. You got to become the anchor, not the flag. Number 2, you have to learn to delegate. So you have to learn to delegate. Once you know what your core values are, delegate the things that are not important to you. So quit trying to do everything for everyone. I know for me in my life, my core value is not mowing the grass because I know that I have bigger things to do. So whether it's my business, whether it's at the gym, whether it's at home, these things are delegated out so that I am not stressing myself out on a Saturday evening or a Sunday morning trying to mow the grass, get my oil changed, or do something that's not important or doesn't identify with my core values. So if you're constantly doing something that you don't like and that doesn't identify with what your core values are, learn to delegate it to somebody else. And number 3, learn to say no. So if you know your core values, it's okay to say no. And what this is all about is that it's all about boundaries. If you fail to draw and communicate boundaries and you begin feeling exhausted and unappreciated, you have to learn how to draw these boundaries. I have been there. In my own life at one point, every patient had my cell phone number, every patient had my email. And what happened was soon I was getting texts on the weekends, emails that were asking for advice on Saturday afternoon. People started crossing into my boundaries and it really began stressing me out. I was getting really frustrated. But then I realized is that it was all my fault. And how could anyone know my boundaries if I didn't communicate with them what my boundaries were? How could I expect them to actually read my mind? This is a tough situation. If you've never established boundaries with others, and then you have to go back and you have to draw those boundaries or let people know what your boundaries are, you're going to experience quite a bit of backlash from those people. And it can become a new source of stress. That's okay. It's kind of like disciplining your child after years of letting them get their way. And how do you think they respond? They kick, they scream, they cry. And listen, adults, they react too, but sometimes it can be in the form of guilt or shaming you or, backbiting, or it might be gossip. But here's the thing. It's okay to say no. I believe that you should be a very giving person, but understand that you can't necessarily give to everyone who asks. And so you should be a joyful giver, and so I should identify, these are my values, and this is where I find joy in giving, and say no to everything else. Learn to say no. It's okay. And then the last thing is, with the mental, is to let it go. Let it go. Do you need to always be right? Listen, you're never going to convince everyone. And you can see this particularly on social media. The person that always has to get on and always has to prove their case, state their case, and always be right. And literally today, I don't think one mind has been changed via social media. Listen, you've identified there's 3 kinds of people. There's the seeker, there's the skeptic, and there's the cynic. And here's what you do with those people, is you encourage the seeker. You help them, you facilitate them, you foster. Then the skeptic, you engage with them. This is someone who asks questions. You engage with them and you help them along the way. And then you have the cynic. And this is the person who you're never going to change their mind, and you ignore them. You don't even engage with them. Remember, if you threw a stick at every dog who barked at you along your journey towards health, you would never get anywhere. Those are the 4 biggest things that you can start fixing with the mental in order to decrease stress. Let's go over the chemical now. So remember, the second leg is the chemical. So let's talk about sleep. Remember, if you're not getting enough sleep, that's going to increase cortisol. So the questions that actually come up is, how much sleep should I be getting? Well, you should be getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep. And when should you sleep? You should get at least half of your sleep before 2 a.m. Now, how should you prepare for sleep? So you should have absolutely no electronic lights. So no TV, no cell phone. You want no alarm clock that you see the light at least 1 hour before you go to sleep. And you want to sleep in an environment that's under complete darkness. Now, there's some actually supplements and vitamins and things that you can do to help with sleep, and I'm going to go over that a little bit. Some of them include 5-HTP, B vitamins, essential fatty acids, and also an herb that's called ashwagandha, that once you start to plug the holes that help you bail out your boat. Now, here's another form of chemical stress. These would be what are known as food sensitivities. Now, the only way to know if you're having any kind of food sensitivities is actually get a test. And this is actually a blood test that you can get that can give you a runoff on how many of the foods are actually producing chemical stress and food, an immune system reaction inside of the body. And even if you don't get that test, here's some of the biggest culprits. Wheat. So wheat that contains gluten can actually create a food sensitivity. And this will create a stress response inside the body. What about grains? Well, grains actually contain what are known as glyphosate. Glyphosate is also known as Roundup. And this is actually a huge chemical stress on the body, mainly because glyphosate can damage the microbiome in the GI system. And it can also create what's known as intestinal permeability, which in the GI system, which then can stress the adrenals even more. And another one is actually going to be dairy. Now they call casein the devil in the milk. And a lot of times, basically, when people have, let's say they're lactose intolerant, it's actually they have an immune system reaction to casein. Now, you literally can essentially develop an immune reaction to anything. Now, these aren't life-threatening allergies. This is that you don't go into anaphylactic shock, but what happens is you have these subclinical immune system reactions that tend to inflame and start to stress the body. And here's some of the symptoms that can actually happen. This is actually a test. So actually what you see is on this test, you see all of the different reactions that this person is experiencing to all these different types of food. But chronic food intolerances, what they actually lead to are things like chronic earaches, mood swings, fatigue, dark circles under the eyes, asthma. How about kids who are getting canker sores, sinus issues, acne, eczema, brain fog, bloating and excess weight, headache issues, and migraines all can be linked back to having food insensitivities. Now, another thing, the chemical, is to address gut health and address liver toxicity. Now, the reason why this is important when it comes to stress is that if someone has what's known as leaky gut syndrome, you have to understand is that 80% of serotonin, and serotonin is actually involved with happiness and mood and helping you stay asleep at night. And actually 50% of the dopamine, which is responsible for motivation, energy, and reward, this is produced in the gut. So you have to then have a healthy gut. And a lot of times our gut gets destroyed with antibiotics. It can get destroyed with chronic stress. It can get destroyed with just eating the standard American diet. And so what happens is you have to start addressing the gut issues as well. Now, what about detox too? So, because of chronic stress, the body can become toxic. However, you never want to detox into a leaky gut. So you have to start fixing the adrenals, then start fixing the gut, then start fixing the liver. And this is where detoxification actually comes in. So you never want to start detoxing until you've addressed and started plugging some of the other holes. Now, when you opted into that war plan by texting to get that war plan, I also sent you something really cool, and that's a link to my talk on how to fix leaky gut syndrome. So you'll automatically get the link to that talk. Make sure that you watch that to show that how you can actually start fixing leaky gut syndrome. Now, what about the supplements that help you overcome some of these issues if you are tired and wired? And this is in the kind of the initial stages where the adrenal glands are pumping out a lot of cortisol. So here's what you want to start taking. What you have is you have 4 different supplements here that are going to be for tired and wired. And then these supplements over here, these 3, are basically going to be for whether you're tired and wired or whether you're just tired or you're experiencing adrenal collapse. These over here on the right are going to be some of your foundational supplements, meaning you just need to take these whether, if you're in chronic stress or acute stress. Okay? So the first thing that you want to take is you want to take what's known as Max Fit. The reason why you want to start taking Max Fit is because it contains an herb inside of the body, and that herb is called ashwagandha. Now, ashwagandha, this herb does an amazing job of actually lowering the amount of cortisol inside of your body. And in fact, clinical studies have actually shown that it can lower the amount of chronic cortisol inside of your body by 25%. Now, the second thing that you take is you take what's known as Adrenal Calm. Now, Adrenal calm actually helps with what's known as the endocannabinoid system. Now, this system actually is in the body, which helps to calm and relax the body. So someone is under chronic stress, the body goes in what's known as this sympathetic overdrive, meaning it's always in this fight or flight response. And adrenal calm actually contains a neurotransmitter called GABA, gamma aminobutyric acid. And GABA actually helps to calm down the brain and to help calm down the endocannabinoid system to bring the body back into a better state of relaxation. This is particularly helpful to help people fall asleep at night because it starts to inhibit portions of the brain. Now the next one is going to be sleep and mood formula. Now, sleep and mood formula contains something that's really important, and it's called 5-HTP. Now, 5-HTP is a precursor to serotonin. Remember, when you're under chronic stress, it can deplete your serotonin levels. And so 5-HTP helps the body start to give it the resources for the body to increase serotonin levels naturally. And serotonin actually helps you stay asleep, and it's also known as the happy hormone. Now, another one that helps with the body when it's under a state of chronic stress is actually CBD oil. So CBD oil also helps with the endocannabinoid system like adrenal calm. So CBD oil actually helps to break that chronic stress response inside of the body. Now, CBD oil doesn't have THC in it, so it doesn't make you high like if you would be smoking cannabis. So this actually has a calming effect on the central nervous system and on the brain, and it's actually, I highly recommend taking it. Now, magnesium and B vitamins and pro omega-3. So magnesium actually helps the body calm down. B vitamins are really, really important because when you're under stress, your body making all of this norepinephrine or this epinephrine, also known as adrenaline, the body tends to blow through B vitamins because in order to make adrenaline, the body needs B vitamins. So if you're under stress, you want to make sure that you're constantly replenishing the B vitamins inside of the body. Not only that, but if you're kicking out a lot of cortisol and stress hormones, that omega-3 fatty acids also provide the foundation for making hormones. So you need to be replenishing omega-3 fatty acids so that the body can keep up with making some of these growth healing hormones, things like estrogen or thyroid, testosterone or progesterone. Now, this would be if you're tired and wired. What about if you get to the point where you're tired, also known as exhaustion? So what I recommend are that you're taking Max Fit in order. And the reason why we take Max Fit 2 with this is because it also has something that's known as green coffee bean extract. So this green coffee bean extract actually helps with glucose sensitivity. So now it's going to have a different effect if you're tired because it's going to help with this glucose sensitivity that a lot of people have lost being under chronic stress. The second one is to take adrenal energy. Now, adrenal energy contains tyrosine. Tyrosine actually helps the body start to make cortisol again, so it helps with adrenal function. And sleep and mood formula also is going to help with producing serotonin. Now, in addition to that, these again are your foundational supplements: magnesium, B vitamins, pro omega, omega-3 fatty acids. So this is going to help you start to make normal hormones again. And basically they're foundational. They're giving the body what it needs. It's helping you bail out the boat while you're actually plugging the holes. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about is I want to talk about the physical. I'm going to talk about the physical. And this is what a lot of people fail to recognize, is taking care of the physical aspects of stress. I want to talk about the brain and the spine connection. What's interesting with the brain and with the spine is that they're basically one and the same. So here you have the brain, you have the spinal cord, but then you have its protective layer, which is known as the spine. The thing is with the spine and the joints of the spine actually communicate directly back to the brain. So we know that if it's communicating back to the brain, when we have any kind of damage with an area specifically to the spine, it doesn't communicate correctly back to the brain and can start to stress the brain out. So anytime that you have damage to the brain or you have an improperly moving spine, this can cause even more damage to what's known as this HPA axis, also known as the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. So if you don't correct the physical, remember, you're still sitting on an unstable stool. Now, we actually know this for a fact, is that individuals who have had a chronic whiplash injury have negative effects that occur with them with this HPA axis. And they also have a dominating stress hormone known as cortisol. And what they found is these cortisol levels were blunted and they're low in the morning, and then they had an altered rhythm and they had higher levels later on in the day. So what they actually found is that having actually a whiplash injury specifically to the neck actually caused a chronic stress response inside of the body. This is why people, after they have had an auto accident or they have a really damaged spine and nervous system, why they have a really hard time with a lot of different things. It might be losing weight, or it might be with thyroid function, it might be with digestive function, it might be with sleep. And this is actually why that when people start to actively correct the spine, they correct the nerve system, they notice some pretty amazing things start to happen. They start noticing that sleep gets better. I've had people actually notice that weight loss started to happen without changing anything other than correcting their spine and their nerve system. I've seen that thyroid function starts to improve. You start seeing that chronic pain levels start to go down because of that chronic stress hormones have actually been broken. Now, this is actually a perfect example. When you look at this right here, these are the same patient about 4 months apart. This is actually a woman who, when she came in, she had chronic pain, she had unexplained weight gain, and had terrible sleep. Now you can actually see when you look from the side, you can see that she had what was known as a reverse curve in through the neck. Now this is putting an incredible amount of stress on the spinal cord, on the nerve system, and it's actually stressing out the brain because her brain knows that she is here when she has to be in this position. Now, what happens is when you can see that once we got her in and actually restored about 60 to 70% of that within about 4 months, one of the things that she notices is that the chronic pain actually went away, and she actually saw that her sleep was able to finally sleep through the night. Well, we actually identified a major stress on the brain that was driving those hormones out of control, and once you got it corrected, it actually helped to calm down the brain. Now, one of the reasons why this happens is because people have two divisions of this nerve system. Remember, we talked about the sympathetic nerve system. The sympathetic nerve system is what gets you in this fight or flight mode. Well, you also have a second part of your nerve system. This part of the nerve system is called the parasympathetic nerve system. Parasympathetic nerve system is to calm down and to relax the nerve system. We call this rest and digest. Now, there's a major nerve inside of the body that's known as the vagus nerve. And this vagus nerve actually sits at the very top part of the neck, and it's called vagus because it wanders to all the organs inside of the body to allow the body to calm down, to relax, to rest, and bring you into a state of relaxation and healing and digestion. So what happens is that a lot of people, if they have had damage or injury to their spine, well, they actually will have an increase in what's known as sympathetic tone, and they also have damage that can occur to their vagus nerve. So a lot of what we do in chiropractic is restoring parasympathetic activity through the vagus nerve to allow the body to rest and digest, to grow, to heal, and to repair. So people in this fight or flight, you can see all the different things that happens. So this can be a physical stress, a chemical stress, or a mental stress. This right here is actually what happens when you're in a state of relaxation and in a state of healing. And so what we do by correcting the spine and nerve system is actually bring this back to the nerve system. So here's some of the symptoms of how you know if you've had any kind of physical problems that are happening to the spine and to the nerve system. So problems in the spine and the nerve system can lead to chronic pain or fibromyalgia, can lead to neck pain and headaches. numbness or burning or tingling into your hands, thyroid issues, asthma, allergies, even autoimmunity, digestive issues, reflux, bloating, constipation, chronic low back pain and sciatica, problems with sleep, staying asleep, or energy system issues, and even brain fog. And I've actually seen all of these things improve just by correcting the physical. Now here's the last question that I get a lot of people ask me. They say, Dr. Thompson, I want to start exercising again. And I look at them and I see that they're in chronic stress, or let's say we actually do a cortisol test and we see that they're actually tired and wired. So if I see that they're tired and wired, we actually allow them to be able to exercise and be able to do high intensity exercise. This can actually help. One of the type of exercise that you want to avoid, actually most of the time, no matter what your state is as far as your cortisol levels, is actually avoiding low intensity, long duration. Low intensity, long duration, or moderate intensity but long duration, anything longer than 20 minutes, can chronically elevate your cortisol levels. And chronically elevated cortisol, we already know what that does. So when it comes to exercise, you should be exercising very short in general and very intense. That will not drive up the cortisol levels to a very high level. But what happens if you're just going through absolute exhaustion? Well, my opinion is if you're experiencing adrenal burnout, extreme adrenal fatigue, I actually believe that you should actually avoid exercising for the time being to allow your adrenal glands to be able to recover. And instead, for a period of 2 to 3, maybe even 4 months, is that you are doing just very light stretching, mobilization, allowing the body to recover, relax, dialing in your nutrition, but you're not worried about trying to stimulate or get that body into fight or flight by doing high intensity exercise. Now everybody's different, and so this is why you always want to guess and not test. But the skinny is keep your exercises short and intense, and if you're undergoing a chronic adrenal fatigue or burnout, you should avoid exercise altogether and start doing things like stretching, foam rolling, mobilization in order to help the body calm down, relax, and to allow the adrenal glands to be able to recover. Guys, I hope you enjoyed. Let's talk about stress. If you have any questions, leave a comment below, and good luck on your journey of becoming stress-free and improving your sleep, your energy, and your mood, and start living your best health right now.